Matilda had been driving for what felt like hours, her headlights cutting through the dense, oppressive darkness. The winding road seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, vanishing into the thick blackness of the night. Her GPS had given out long ago, and her phone was nothing more than a lifeless slab of glass, devoid of signal. She had chosen this route, hoping it would be a shortcut to her aunt's house, but the further she went, the more it felt like she was sinking deeper into a forgotten wilderness. The only sound in the car was the low hum of the engine, but that peace was shattered when the car suddenly sputtered. The engine cut out with a violent jerk, and Matilda's stomach flipped as the headlights flickered, then went completely dark. Her hands shot to the wheel as she steered the car to the side of the road. Panic surged through her, and she turned the ignition again, but the engine refused to respond. The car was dead. The eerie stillness of the night pressed in on her, thick and suffocating. There was no sound, no sign of life around her, just the trees, tall and towering, their branches like skeletal arms reaching up to the sky. She glanced around, hoping to spot something familiar. But the road was empty, and the trees loomed like dark, impenetrable walls on either side. Matilda grabbed her phone, praying for a flicker of signal. The screen was blank. No battery, no signal, nothing. Her breath quickened, and a cold shiver ran down her spine. Every instinct screamed at her to get out of the car and run, but the road stretched for miles in both directions. Where would she go? There was nothing nearby, no sign of any town or life. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Something didn't feel right. She squinted into the darkness, searching for any movement. Then, just beyond the faint glow of the car's dead headlights, she saw it, an unnatural shape. A figure, tall, hunched over, and moving with a jerky, disturbing gait that didn't look quite human. The figure was close enough that Matilda could feel the weight of its presence, but too far to make out any details. The air grew colder. Her heart pounded in her chest as she quickly locked the doors, her hands trembling. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The figure seemed to vanish into the trees, but the sensation of being followed remained. Matilda glanced around again. Nothing. The road was still empty, but the silence felt heavier now. She felt as if the very darkness around her was closing in. The wind was still, and the trees stood motionless, but there was something alive in the air, something ancient. Then, a sound, a low, groaning noise. It was coming from behind her. Matilda froze, her body stiffening in fear. The noise was like something dragging itself across the ground, the scrape of something heavy against the earth. It grew louder, closer. Suddenly, the rearview mirror cracked. Matilda gasped, her eyes darting to the shattered glass. Through the fractured mirror, she saw it, a face. Hollow, black eyes staring back at her from the reflection. The face was distorted, impossible to understand, and yet it was there, staring into her soul. She whipped her head around, her breath catching in her throat, but the back seat was empty. The scraping sound stopped, and the world around her fell silent again. But it was a different kind of silence now. The stillness was oppressive, thick, as if the very air had become suffocating. Matilda had to get out of the car. She couldn't stay here, but where could she go? She grabbed her purse and opened the door, her legs unsteady as she stepped onto the dirt road. The ground felt uneven beneath her feet, and her heart pounded in her chest as she ran into the woods, blindly pushing her way through the trees. Branches slapped at her face, but she didn't care. She had to get away from the car, from whatever was out there. She stumbled and fell, scraping her hands on the rough ground. When she looked up, panic gripped her. The road was gone. The trees around her were thicker than before, and they stretched on in every direction, an impenetrable forest with no way out. She was lost. From behind her came the whispering, a soft, slithering voice that seemed to come from the shadows themselves. "Stay, just stay." Matilda's skin crawled. The voice was too familiar, too close, and yet she dared not turn around. She felt eyes on her, the weight of something following her every step. The forest was alive, aware of her every movement. The air around her grew colder, denser, as though it were closing in, pressing against her chest. She couldn't see the end of the path. She couldn't hear anything but the rush of blood in her ears. The whispers grew louder, clearer. "Why did you come here?" Matilda screamed, her voice breaking the stillness of the night, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. Then nothing. The road, the car, the figure, it was all gone. The night had consumed everything, and Matilda was left alone in a place that no longer existed, lost forever in a world of shadows and whispers. Matilda died that night,